Here is part 1 of Dragon Husband. Dragon Husband. Part 1. The Emperor's Curse. In the heart of the Tang dynasty, under the rule of Emperor Xuanzong, a powerful prophecy whispered through the imperial court, one that spoke of a man destined to become a dragon. Many dismissed it as folklore, but those who understood the old magic knew the truth. Such a man existed, and he was already within the palace walls. General Li Jian was no ordinary warrior. He was a legend on the battlefield, a man whose strength and strategy had brought victory after victory for the empire. But beneath his human exterior lay a secret, one that bound him to an ancient curse. Since birth, he had been marked by a dragon spirit. His mother, a mysterious woman from the western provinces, had vanished when he was a child, leaving behind only a jade amulet carved with dragon scales. Over time, he had begun to feel the presence of something unnatural within him. His wounds healed faster than those of ordinary men, his senses were sharper, and at times he could hear the whisper of an ancient voice calling to him. But none of this mattered to him as much as Lady May. Lady May was the emperor's most favored concubine, a woman of unparalleled beauty and wisdom. Unlike the other concubines, she had not sought power or riches. She was content with her music, her poetry, and the solitude of her gardens. Yet fate had tied her life to Li Jian's in ways neither of them could have foreseen. Their love was a dangerous one, hidden behind silken veils and stolen glances in moonlit corridors. They met in secret, knowing that discovery would mean death. One fateful evening, under the glow of a red lantern, May pressed her trembling hands to Li Jian's chest. "We cannot go on like this," she whispered. "The Emperor suspects. I heard his advisors speaking of you today." Li Jian's jaw clenched. He knew the dangers, but the thought of losing her was unbearable. "I will protect you," he swore. May shook her head. "There is no escape from the palace." But Li Jian knew otherwise. He had begun to dream of the mountains beyond the capital, dreams where fire raged and wings spread wide. A voice told him that his fate was written in the stars, that his blood was not meant for a mortal life. And as he looked into May's tear-filled eyes, he knew one thing for certain. If he had to become a dragon to protect the woman he loved, then so be it. Part 2. The Forbidden Escape. The palace was a world of golden cages, its beauty unmatched, yet its walls suffocating. Li Jian had spent years navigating the emperor's court, learning its dangers, but now every moment felt like a blade pressed against his throat. Lady May's warning weighed on his heart. He knew Emperor Xuanzong was a man of suspicion, and if whispers of their affair had reached his ears, death would follow. That night, beneath the lantern-lit corridors of the palace, Li Jian met May in the hidden pavilion of the eastern garden. Moonlight shimmered on her silk robes, her delicate hands clutching his as if she could tether him to safety. "There is no time," she whispered urgently. "You must leave." He tightened his grip on her fingers. "Not without you." Tears welled in her blue-gray eyes. "It is impossible. The palace gates are sealed. The guards watch my every move." But Li Jian had not survived countless battles without learning how to outwit an enemy. He had already devised a plan, a dangerous one. "The Mid-Autumn Festival is in 3 nights," he said. "The city will be alive with celebrations. The emperor and his court will watch the fireworks over the river. That is when we flee." May hesitated, fear flickering in her gaze. "And if we are caught?" Li Jian's jaw clenched. "Then I will fight." She reached up, pressing a trembling hand to his cheek. "I cannot bear the thought of losing you." He turned his face into her palm, placing a soft kiss there. "You will not." But deep in his soul, something stirred, an ancient presence, restless and waiting. The night of the festival arrived in a burst of color. Lanterns floated into the sky like stars, their glow reflecting on the shimmering waters of the palace lake. Music and laughter filled the air as noblewomen and scholars gathered along the riverbanks, their faces aglow with drink and delight. Dressed as a palace servant, May moved unnoticed through the corridors. Her heart pounded as she approached the hidden passage where Li Jian waited. He had disguised himself as a merchant's guard, his sword hidden beneath the folds of his cloak. When their eyes met, relief flooded through him. He took her hand, leading her swiftly toward the northern gate. But just as they neared the exit, a voice shattered the silence. "Halt!" A dozen Imperial guards stepped into view, their spears glinting under the lantern light. May gasped, her fingers tightening around Li Jian's hand. "No." The captain of the guard stepped forward, his expression grim. "General Li Jian, the Emperor requests your presence immediately." Li Jian's pulse roared in his ears. He knew what this meant. They had been discovered. But just as the guards closed in, something inside him awoke. A burning heat surged through his veins, his vision sharpening, his muscles tensing with an unnatural force, and somewhere in the depths of his mind a voice spoke. "Now, you are ready." Chapter 3: A Blossoming Bond. In gratitude, the Dragon King invited Liu Wei to stay in the palace. Days turned into weeks, and Liu Wei and Ao Shui spent time together, sharing stories and dreams. Their bond deepened, and love blossomed between the mortal and the dragon princess. One evening, under a canopy of glowing pearls, Ao Shui confessed, "Liu Wei, my heart has found solace in your presence." Liu Wei took her hand, "And mine in yours, Ao Shui." Dragon Husband. Part 4. The Emperor's Wrath. The golden flames flickered in the courtyard, casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. Li Jian stood amid the fallen guards, his chest heaving, his hands still glowing with embers of the fire that had erupted from within. For the first time in his life, he felt truly alive. But there was no time to linger. The palace bells were ringing, their sharp tones slicing through the night air like a war cry. More soldiers would come. The Emperor would not tolerate betrayal, especially not from his most trusted general. Li Jian sprinted toward the northern wall where Mei had disappeared. His body felt different, stronger, faster. He leaped onto a ledge with ease, his feet barely making a sound as he landed. The dragon's power coursed through him, guiding his movements. He reached the stables in time to see Mei pulling herself onto a black stallion. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she gripped the reins. "Li Jian!" she gasped as he approached. "What are you?" He didn't know how to answer, not yet. Instead, he mounted a second horse, his eyes scanning the palace gates. Already torches were appearing in the distance, soldiers pouring into the courtyards like ants. "We have to move," he said. Mei nodded, and together they spurred their horses forward, galloping through the hidden servants' path that led toward the outer walls. They had almost made it when the sound of a single drum stopped them. Boom! The palace gates burst open, and from the shadows emerged a towering figure clad in golden robes. Emperor Xuanzong. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. Behind him, rows of imperial guards stood with drawn bows, their arrows glistening under the lantern light. "Li Jian," the emperor said, his voice cold as winter, "I trusted you. I raised you as a son." Li Jian's hands tightened around the reins. "And yet you would kill me for love." The emperor's lips curled in disdain. "You speak of love, but I see treason. Do you know what you are?" Li Jian's pulse quickened. Did the emperor know about the dragon blood within him? Xuanzong exhaled slowly. "The prophecy spoke of a man who would burn my empire to ashes, a man cursed with the soul of a dragon. I should have had you executed as a child." Mei gasped. "You knew?" The emperor's expression did not change. "Fate cannot be avoided, but it can be controlled." He lifted a hand, and the archers took aim. Li Jian's body moved before his mind could think. He raised one hand, and a wave of heat exploded outward. Flames. Blazing, golden flames. The arrows never reached them. They burned in mid-air, turning to ash before they could strike. The emperor did not flinch. His gaze remained locked on Li Jian, as if daring him to attack. But Li Jian did not want to fight the man who had once been his mentor. He turned to Mei. "Ride, now." Without hesitation, she spurred her horse forward. Li Jian turned back to the emperor one last time. "I will return," he vowed, "and when I do, I will uncover the truth of what I am." Then, with a final burst of dragon's fire, he vanished into the night. Part 5. The Dragon's Blood. The wind howled as Li Jian and Mei rode through the dense bamboo forests outside the capital. The fire in his veins had not yet settled. It crackled beneath his skin, urging him forward, whispering secrets he did not yet understand. Mei's horse galloped beside his, her face pale but determined. "Where are we going?" she called over the wind. "The Red Lotus Temple," he replied. "It's the only place we'll be safe." The temple, hidden deep within the mountains, was a place of ancient magic. It was said that monks there had once worshipped the dragons of old. Perhaps they would have answers about what he had become, but the journey was treacherous. As dawn broke, they reached the river crossing. Li Jian dismounted, his eyes scanning the horizon. He could still feel the Emperor's presence like a shadow at his back. "They will hunt us," Mei whispered. "The Emperor will never stop." Li Jian turned to her, his gaze burning with quiet resolve. "Then I must learn to control this power." Mei hesitated, then reached out, touching his arm. "You saved us back there, but, Li Jian, what if this fire inside you is more than a gift? What if it's a curse?" He had no answer. Before he could respond, a rustling in the trees made him tense. He drew his sword just as 3 figures stepped into view. Monks, dressed in red robes, their faces calm and unreadable. The leader, an elderly man with silver eyes, studied Li Jian for a long moment. "We have been waiting for you," he said. Li Jian's grip on his sword tightened. "Who are you?" The old monk smiled faintly. "Your ancestors called us the keepers of the dragon's blood." Mei stiffened. "You know what he is?" The monk nodded. "You are more than a man, Li Jian. You are the last descendant of the Fireborn, the warriors who once walked among dragons." Li Jian's breath caught. "Then tell me what this power is. Why was I given this fate?" The monk's silver eyes gleamed. "Because, young warrior, you are not just a man." He stepped closer, pressing a hand against Li Jian's chest. "You are a dragon waiting to awaken." And at those words, fire erupted around them, painting the morning sky in gold. Part 6. The Path of Fire. The golden flames danced around them, yet they did not burn. Mei shielded her eyes as the fire swirled, twisting into shapes, serpentine, fierce, alive. Li Jian could feel the heat coursing through his body, but this time it did not overwhelm him. It felt natural, as if he had been born for this. The old monk withdrew his hand, the flames vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. "The dragon within you is stirring," he said, "but if you do not master it, it will consume you." Li Jian clenched his fists. "Then teach me." The monk nodded. "Come, your training begins now." They traveled deeper into the mountains, where the Red Lotus Temple stood hidden beneath the mist. The monastery was ancient, its stone walls carved with depictions of dragons soaring through the skies. Mei watched silently as Li Jian was led into the sacred hall. She wanted to follow, to stay by his side, but the monks forbade it. "This path is his alone," the old monk told her. She hated the thought of leaving him, but she understood. Inside, Li Jian stood before a massive stone brazier, its fire burning without wood. The monk gestured to it. "Tell me, Li Jian, what do you see?" He gazed into the flames. At first, they were just fire. But then, they changed. The embers twisted into visions. A battlefield drenched in blood, an emperor's throne wrapped in shadows, and above it all, a dragon with golden scales roaring into the heavens. Li Jian gasped, stepping back. The monk's voice was calm. "This is your fate." Li Jian's chest tightened. "I don't understand." The monk turned to him, eyes gleaming like molten silver. "You were not born to serve an emperor. You were born to challenge him." Li Jian's mind reeled. Was this why the emperor had feared him? Had the prophecy spoken of his downfall? The monk continued, "The fire inside you is not just power, it is a memory. The last dragons of the East perished long ago, but their blood flows through you." Li Jian exhaled shakily. "Then what must I do?" The monk smiled. "To awaken the dragon, you must first let go of the man." The words chilled him, but as the flames whispered secrets in his ears, he knew one thing. There was no turning back. Part 7. The Emperor's Hunt. While Li Jian trained deep within the mountains, the Emperor's wrath burned across the empire. At dawn, imperial messengers rode through the streets of Chang'an, posting decrees on every corner. General Li Jian is a traitor. A reward of 10,000 gold pieces for his capture, dead or alive. The people whispered in fear. How could the emperor turn against his most loyal warrior? What crime had he committed? But none dared to question. The emperor's word was law. In the palace, Xuanzang stood before a large bronze map of the empire. His hands were clenched behind his back as his war minister bowed before him. "We have sent scouts north, west, and east, but there is no sign of him," the minister reported. The emperor's gaze darkened. "He is heading south." The minister hesitated. "South? Toward the mountains?" Xuanzang nodded. "He seeks the Red Lotus Temple." A silence fell over the chamber. Everyone knew the stories. The monks of the Red Lotus were no ordinary men. They were guardians of lost knowledge, the keepers of dragon lore. 8. Flames of War. The Red Lotus Temple stood silent beneath the pale moon, its monks deep in meditation. But Li Jian could not rest. He knelt in the courtyard, fists clenched, fire flickering around his arms as he struggled to control the power within. The training had been grueling. He had learned to summon fire at will, to move faster than the human eye could follow, and to hear the whispers of the dragon spirit inside him. But true mastery still eluded him, and time was running out. May approached, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You haven't slept." "I can't," he admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see fire. I see death." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He met her gaze, his golden eyes filled with unease. "The Emperor is coming." Even as he spoke, the sound of distant war drums echoed through the valley. The wind carried the scent of smoke. The attack had begun. From the mountain pass, 500 imperial soldiers advanced, their torches painting the night with blood-red light. At their head rode General Wu, a hardened warrior loyal only to the emperor. His sword gleamed as he raised it high. "Burn it all," he commanded. Arrows ignited mid-flight as they rained down upon the temple, flames licking at the sacred halls. The monks rushed to defend their sanctuary, but they were no match for the emperor's army. In the courtyard, Li Jian felt the dragon inside him roar. His hands curled into fists, his blood burned like molten gold. "They have come for me," he murmured. May's eyes widened. "Then we must run." "No," he said, his voice calm. "This ends tonight." He stepped forward, the wind swirling around him, embers rising in the air. As the soldiers charged, he inhaled deeply and unleashed a firestorm. The flames erupted from his body, twisting into the form of a golden dragon, its roar shaking the heavens. The soldiers screamed, their torches extinguished by the inferno that swept through their ranks. General Wu's horse reared in terror. He stared at Li Jian, not as a man, but as something more, something unstoppable. This is impossible," Wu whispered. Li Jian stepped toward him, his feet leaving scorched earth in their wake. "Tell the emperor," he said, his voice echoing with power. "I am coming for him." Dragon Husband, Part 9. The Dragon Rises. The battlefield smoldered in the wake of Li Jian's fire. The Red Lotus Temple stood partially in ruins, but its sacred halls still held strong. The emperor's soldiers, those who had not perished in the inferno, fled into the darkness, their spirits shattered. Li Jian stood in the center of it all, his chest rising and falling with deep, measured breaths. The fire inside him no longer burned out of control. He had become one with it. May ran to his side, her face a mixture of awe and fear. "You did it," she whispered. He turned to her, his golden eyes glowing in the dim light. Not yet. The Emperor was still waiting, and now it was time to end this. Part 10. The Dragon's Throne. The Forbidden City loomed before him, its crimson walls reflecting the light of the torches that lined its gates. The Imperial Guards stood in formation, but there was no hesitation in their stance. They had seen what Li Jian had done. They knew they could not stop him. He walked through them like a specter, May beside him, her hand gripping his tightly. The massive golden doors to the throne room swung open, as if the palace itself had surrendered. And there, on the dragon throne, sat Emperor Xuanzong. The old ruler's face was unreadable, his robes pristine, his crown unshaken. But Li Jian could see the truth in his eyes, fear. "You have come to kill me," the Emperor said. Li Jian's gaze did not waver. "I have come to end the cycle," Xuanzong exhaled. "Then do it." But Li Jian did not raise his sword. He did not call upon his fire. Instead, he turned to the gathered nobles, the ministers, the scholars who had watched this empire rot under the weight of one man's paranoia. "This throne was never yours," he said to the Emperor. "It was never meant for any man. Power belongs to the people, not to the ones who fear them." A ripple of murmurs spread through the court. The Emperor's grip on his armrest tightened. "What will you do then?" Xuanzong sneered. "Rule in my place?" Li Jian stepped forward. His golden eyes burned with something greater than vengeance, purpose. "No," he said, "I will rule as the last dragon." Then, before the Emperor could speak, Li Jian spread his arms, and fire erupted around him. The palace shook as golden flames twisted into the shape of a great dragon, its wings spreading across the heavens. And in that moment, Li Jian let go of his human form. Before the eyes of the court, before May's tear-filled gaze, he transformed. Scales of gold shimmered in the firelight. His body lengthened, his wings stretched toward the sky, and his roar shook the walls of the Forbidden City. He was no longer just a man. He was the last of the Fireborn, the last dragon of the East. And as he took to the skies, the world below changed forever. The age of emperors had ended. The age of dragons had begun. The end. Thank you for following this journey. I hope you enjoyed Dragon Husband. Would you like a sequel or another story?